Yeah, I don't really know how this whole sitch is gonna work out, but that's cool. That whole sitch.
This whole sitch.
It might be you and a mystery voice.
I mean, or like every time I stop speaking, I could back up and you could speak on the mic. Meh. There would be a lot of.
That's extra.
It's a lot of moving around.
You like to move it. Hi, Miss Claxton.
I really am saying that.
Okay, so we're all set. The only thing is that you'll just need to, if someone asks questions, just repeat the question into the microphone.
Okay.
And then people online can hear the question. That's weird.
Okay.
Anything else?
Will you be? Do you have a clear line of sight for both of us?
I do. If you guys want to, come. It's kind of hard to angle because this room's so tiny. I can't really like lock that way. So it's like the screen. It's like on an angle a little bit, but and I can see you too. The only difference with the webcam is that the brightness settings, because the screen's so bright, it's like dimming down the rest of it. So when you guys start talking, I'll just focus it on you.
Okay.
I'll swing it back over to the screen. So people will be able to see you and hear you, but mainly the focus will be on you.
Cool. Okay. Cool. Thank you. She's like that lady from the last comment on Maddie's panel. She said,
There was one of those.
"It is 10:31. You want to wait a few minutes?"
Unless she signals, she might tell us to start.
Conference seating. Everyone's all the way back there. Did you get some breakfast?
No. And I wasn't hungry. Dylan got an apple.
Did they have breakfast in the...
They had pastries. Pastries and coffee. Hi, girl.
Man, we forgot to invite Lou.
I thought about it like this morning at like 8, and I was like, I don't know if texting him at 8 and inviting him down would even be worth it.
You'd have to hustle.
I'm like, where are all the activisty weirdos?
Maybe they're elsewhere. We'll just start in a few minutes. Shut up.
Unless we're already rivaling. Well, what if we were?
Get rid of that. Those bags, man, they are the best.
They must be really cheap to manufacture because they're just like so freely given away everywhere.
Yeah,
But
they're sturdy. Any minute.
Yeah.
You see, Jen Gibbs is like, when are they going to start? She said, I think she said she would watch on her phone.
Really?
Yeah,
Isn't she at work yet?
I thought so, but I don't know.
I know one of my friends on the West Coast said, I'll watch while I'm getting ready for work. Oh my god, wait, they can see us. Gibbs, I'm watching.
You want to begin? Oh, wait till these two dudes come back in.
Or unless you want to just start.
Meh, we'll start. Okay. There's Mr. Duffins. Norm.
Okay, I guess we're going to get started now. So my name is Erica Smith,
I'm Jasmine Oglesby.
and we're here to talk to you about our work in the Youth Study Center, which is the juvenile detention center here in Philly. And our work has been HIV prevention, and we've been doing it for the last 10 years, so we wanted to share some information about our program with you.
Okay, so 2012 is the 10-year anniversary of the inception of the Youth Study Center part of the Adolescent Initiative program. And our goal is to prevent HIV infection in the lives of those youth who are either delinquent or in the dependent systems who are at highest risk. And we do that with intensive individual-based case management, sexuality education, and linkage to medical care, including HIV testing and other kinds of testing, and safer sex supplies.
And besides the two of us, our program director, who can't be here today, hi Chris, is
Hi,
Christine
Chris.
Ambrose. So we just wanted to make sure we acknowledged her as well. So a few of the things that we're going to talk to you about today, we're going to explain how our program got started and why, what our goals are, how it works, the things we've seen over the last 10 years, and some of the trends we've seen, including regarding LGBT youth. And then you'll have time to ask questions.
So just to take a minute to give you the proper context of our program within the Youth Study Center, the Adolescent Initiative is much bigger than just the two of us. It's a team of folks over at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and it encompasses all of the following aspects of care. So that includes primary medical care in our Adolescent Care Center, which is at 3550 Market Street. HIV specialty care for youth who are already HIV positive, clinical case management specifically for positive youth, ATN, which is the research arm of our team, which no one is researched unless they consent to being researched, so there have been some questions about that in the past. Our services are not research-based whatsoever. We are completely service-based, so please let that be known. C2P, or Connect to Protect, is a community-level intervention, and that is in conjunction with a number of other community-based providers in the Philadelphia area. Then there's outreach and prevention education, there's us, prevention case management, and there's HIV counseling and testing. Some of our cohort is here. Thank you, guys. And mental health services, which at this point are specifically for youth who are involved in HIV care at our clinic.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the Youth Study Center. And those of you who know it may recognize this is the old building that has since been knocked down to make way for the Barnes Foundation Museum. So the definition of the Youth Study Center from the Department of Human Services is that it is Philadelphia's secure detention center designed to provide temporary care, custody, and control for alleged and adjudicated delinquents ages 13 and over who are awaiting court action. And we want to take a moment here to let our audience know that Jasmine and I are the Children's Hospital, and we're contracted by the Youth Study Center. We've spoken here throughout the years, and sometimes people approach us as if we are the Youth Study Center, and we make the rules and we set the policy, and we don't. So if you do have concerns about the Youth Study Center itself and what goes on in there, we're not the ones to bring it to right now.
We can get you in touch with the appropriate people, but it's not us. We ain't do it.
Okay, so now you get your lovely view inside the Youth Study Center. This is the current center, which is over on Henry Avenue in East Falls. That's a picture of one of the hallways for residents. That's a picture of one of the day rooms. So what goes on is that if you're between 13 and 18 and you've committed a serious offense, an alleged serious offense, and they think that you're going to be a flight risk or not show up at court, you go to the YSC to await your hearing. So it's not a place where people do their time. It's not a place where people are placed for a long period of time. It's just where you go before they decide what happens to you. Mm-hmm. And there is a Philadelphia school district inside. They do have activities, including school and mental health services and things like that.
So currently the facility has a capacity to host 105 residents. Since people cycle in and out every day, every week, every month, it's about 5,000 youth a year. And the typical stay is between 6 and 10 days, but that can vary based on a lot of things, including what placements are available for youth, whether they be dependent placements or otherwise, group home settings, RTF, which is residential treatment facilities, etc. So sometimes that can take a while to sort out, and some people are really just there for a few hours and then they're gone.
And the picture on this slide is of the new youth study that's currently under construction in West Philadelphia. Projected time that we're going to be in there is October. Is that correct?
Ish.
October-ish. It is behind schedule. It's the city, you know.
Things happen. Stuff.
Okay, so a little bit about how our program came to be. It all started with an idea in the fall of 2001. The Youth Study Center is run by the Department of Human Services, and people in there were noticing for the first time that they were seeing a lot of LGBT youth who were out. And I mean, I think we know that there have always been LGBT youth in the system, but this was the first time that they were becoming visible to the people working at the Youth Study Center. And DHS thought they didn't really have specific services for this population. They weren't sure how to handle it. There was a lot of unknowns at this time. Like, people weren't sure what do these youth need. Sometimes they were being placed on the infirmary unit when they were just transgender youth. So DHS approached Christine Ambrose, who's our boss at CHOP, and asked if she could create a program based on her successful HIV medical case management program. And so they began to develop the program that is now the two of us, and partnered with ACO, who's the AIDS Activities Coordinating Office. So we do receive part of our funding from DHS and part of our funding from ACO. And the program, with its original case manager, Kenyette Barnes, launched in March of 2002. I came on in November of 2002, and by the end of that year, we had served 303 youth. And we'll talk more about what our serving youth means.
And then I came on in the fall of '03, and since then, I love this because Erica really condensed like many years of work into averages. And so, of course, some years were fatter and some years were leaner as far as youth who were eligible for our services and youth who consented to services and youth who were available for services. Sometimes life gets chaotic and people don't always want to avail themselves of our services immediately. And here we are, 10 years later.
So the goal of the Adolescent Initiative, as stated in our original grant proposals and to this day, is that we provide intensive case management to heterosexual females, MSM, which means men who have sex with men, and or transgender youth who are engaging in behaviors that place them at high risk for STDs, including HIV. And we just want to note, although the language in the funding is heterosexual females, we work with a whole variety of females that may identify any different way when it comes to sexual orientation. But if they have any sexual contact with men, then that's enough to classify them for the purposes of the program.
Also, I just wanted to pull apart the term transgender just for a second. Most of the trans youth who have been on our caseload identify as M to F, or born male and living as female. We have had some other trans-identified youth, some F to M, and then a few who identify as somewhere else in the gender spectrum.
So to be eligible for our program, you have to be involved in dependency or delinquency, and of the three populations we just mentioned, and at high risk for HIV. So we're going to explain what it means for us, for our purposes, to be high risk for HIV.
So when we are interviewing people initially to see if they might be eligible to work with us and if there's anything valuable that we can teach them, we are trying to listen for any combination of the following and some other things. We're listening to hear if people are reporting multiple sex partners, and we don't mean like 2 or 3, we mean more than that. Current or previous treatment of STIs or STDs and possible multiple infections, commercial sex work, and that includes any kind of sex in exchange for anything else, whether that be drugs, a place to stay, money, anything of the kind. We also have worked with many youth who report using drugs intravenously. Usually it's heroin, but there have been some other things that folks are using intravenously. We're looking for folks who are reporting that they are injecting themselves with hormones that are not medically regulated and silicone that is not medical grade. We're also looking for folks who are reporting adult male partners, usually multiple adult male partners, and we don't mean like 18, 19, we mean like 50, 60. We're looking for folks who are reporting that they have an early sexual debut, which just means whenever they lost their virginity or started becoming sexually active. And early, just so that we're all understanding, early for the average person might be, I don't know what the average person thinks is early, 16 or something, but for us we're talking about like 10, 11, 12. We're looking for folks who are reporting a history of surviving sexual assault or child sexual abuse. And I will tell you anecdotally, because we're not research-based, we don't track these numbers, but anecdotally I will tell you that the vast majority of the youth that we work with have reported surviving some kind of sexual assault. We're looking for folks who are pregnant, have been pregnant, or have been pregnant multiple times, regardless of how the pregnancy resulted, miscarriage, abortion, live birth, any of those. We're also looking for folks who report home tattooing and piercing, which is something that we'll talk about more later. And we're also looking for folks who are saying that their residence is unstable and are transient, because those youth may be making choices that aren't necessarily about their immediate health, but they may be about their immediate access to shelter and warmth.
A few other things that we didn't list on the slide is if one of our youth has a known HIV positive partner, and also if we interview a youth and find that they just have a profound lack of sexual health knowledge, which is often the case. And so you do not need all of these risk factors to qualify for a program. Just 2 is usually enough. So the way that we begin working with youth is we often get referred clients, and that can happen by staff at the Youth Study Center, that can happen from judges in family court or probation officers or DHS workers, and a lot of times youth refer their own friends. And if we meet a youth, we conduct a risk assessment on them. And sometimes we just go into the Youth Study Center units and conduct random risk assessments. We'll just ask, hey, we're from CHOP, do you guys want to have a conversation? And we get a lot of our youth that way. And based on our interview, which assesses for all of the criteria we listed on the last slide, if a youth qualifies, we'll begin working with them. A note on this picture, this is a picture that we found of the Youth Study Center. There's a mural inside, and that's one of the parts of the mural. It's very beautiful.
It is a really beautiful mural. What's going to happen to that mural when we move? Do you guys know? For real?
We're
That's
taking the
awesome.
mural with us. That's exciting for us.
Okay, so criteria for admission. We are never, ever, ever, ever mandated, and we like it that way, and we want it to stay that way, meaning no one is ever legally required or otherwise required to work with us. Our services are completely voluntary, and we find that that sets up a pretty decent power dynamic between us and the youth, because if the decision is theirs to talk about their most intimate medical and sexual business, it is way less coercive than if you have to.
And they're used to being in an environment where they don't get choices. They have to get up at this time, they have to eat this food, and so if you let them know that it's up to them if they work with us, that's often enough of an incentive right there.
Also, we've talked about some of the criteria for eligibility. So, of course, the youth's level of risk is also part of the criteria for admission. And the location of the youth. We do end up interacting with a lot of youth while they're being housed at the Youth Study Center, but they may not necessarily leave there and go back to the Philadelphia community right away. Some of them have to go to group homes and placements. Some of those are in-state, some of those are across state, and some of those are out of state. So we will take that on a case-by-case basis, whether we're able to continue visiting with folks after they've been released. Part of our model is to continue following people within their community as much as possible, because we want to provide a continuity of care so that there are consistent people involved in their reproductive health care, not only when they're inside, but also when they're outside, to make sure people feel supported and they have as much ability to be connected to resources within the community as possible.
And so when we are working with the youth who is currently at the Youth Study Center, some of the things we do are meet on a regular basis to discuss things like sexual health, HIV prevention, and their goals when they leave. But we do not just sit down and engage in a discussion of sexual health every single time we meet with the youth. We firmly believe that there is a big picture of HIV prevention, and sometimes that is just making sure people have basic needs met. And you can't go in and say, let's talk about condoms today if somebody's freaking out about court tomorrow. So in that case, we'll let them vent about court. And we establish trust that way. That's how we get to the point where anyone's even ready to have a conversation about HIV prevention. Mm-hmm. So that could include learning skills that would be useful in reducing risk. Sometimes that's skills about condoms, sometimes that's about safer sex work. We have a referral network within CHOP that we can refer people to. We have an adolescent care center on 36 and Market where youth can get family planning care. And we really work on establishing a relationship at this time. So if a youth is released into the community and they still want to work with us, that can happen. Mm-hmm.
I also want to just note at this point, because we're going to start talking about what happens when we continue to work with those youth within the community. It is not a prerequisite to be enrolled as a patient at CHOP or in care at CHOP. We're not recruiting new patients as a sly part of our program. We really don't care where people receive their medical care as long as they receive it. And our place is not always the best place for people to be going, and we fully recognize that, and we encourage people and try to link people to go to other healthcare providers within the city based on where they live, access to transportation, language, and then other specialty care, like if somebody would be better served at the Mazzoni Center, which is an LGBTQ specific medical clinic, then that's where we suggest that they go.
And our services, once youth are released, are very much the same, but we actually have more things we can do. We can link people to medical care, and they can access it in ways they can't when they're incarcerated. And like Jasmine mentioned, specialty care like prenatal and care for LGBT youth. And we do home and community visitation. We visit youth at their homes. We visit youth wherever, if they say, let's meet at a coffee shop or let's meet at this park, we've sat in parks and had conversations. So we are very much tailored to what is best for the client.
All right. Additional services that we try to provide when folks are out in the community. A lot of folks will need additional mental health support, and we do try as much as possible to refer for those services. And that includes mental health support for folks who are ready to begin dealing with surviving sexual assault or sexual abuse. We also try to help. We've been talking about how HIV prevention is not just about here's a condom, here's how you put it on, get busy. People make decisions about their health based on other needs that they have, like food, shelter, clothing, etc., safety of their children. So these things are issues and we cannot ignore them. So we try as much as we can with our limited resources to help alleviate those issues. We also refer to education programs. That could be GED, that could be back into a high school, that could be college or a trade school of some kind. We have a lot of youth who have gone on to complete education and be certified in a number of trades. As well, we go to court with folks if necessary. We used to do this a lot more years ago, before some things changed within the juvenile justice system and before things changed at 1801 in family court.
And part of that is when our program first started, dealing with LGBT youth in a juvenile justice setting was a very new issue to a lot of people, and a lot of people wanted us to help them through it. And that includes Judge Doherty, who is the administrative judge of family court. He would often ask us questions like, can you tell me what this youth needs? Can you explain this to me a little more? The climate for LGBT youth has gotten much better, and we'll talk about that as well, but we were more of a presence in court in the earlier years, I think a lot because of that. Do you want to tell the story?
So Judge Doherty started to work with our program and refer folks to our program in '02 when he inherited a court case of a youth who then was identifying as transgender male to female. And whoever had the case before he got it noted that there was a referral for psychological evaluation to determine what it is. And that was, you know, about a human being. So he was appalled by that ignorance, and he decided that no young person who came before him in court or came through 1801 should be subjected to that kind of treatment. So he tried to make a big effort to educate himself and also form a network of providers who had it in their interest to support these young people.
The last thing we do, it's really not the last thing we do, but the last thing on this slide is we collaborate freely with other people involved in the case. So if a youth has a PO, a DHS worker, an involved parent, we always keep lines of communication open with them. Also keeping in mind that we have to adhere to HIPAA laws because we're the hospital. So we cannot tell a youth's personal sexual business to anyone else in their life unless they say that we can legally. So since the bulk of our program does involve sexual health and sexual health education, I know this slide has a lot of information on it, but we just wanted to give you an idea of some of the topics that we talk about. No session we have with youth is ever the same. We have games we play that deal with reproductive health. We have activities. Sometimes we just have really candid conversations. Some of the topics that come up time and time again are basic reproductive anatomy and function. And sometimes there's a serious lack of knowledge about this topic. I kind of blame abstinence-only education, and not just for the youth that we're seeing, but even for the youth's older brothers and sisters and parents. It's kind of like they're hearing misinformation and they're just continuing to believe it and to spread it. We speak to youth about birth control options, safer sex, condoms and other barrier methods, pregnancy options. We talk about safer needle use, safety during commercial sex work, safe tattooing and piercing, which once again we'll mention in a bit. We speak to them about what kind of resources are available in their communities. Like if you live in North Philly, where can you go to get your HIV test? If you live in Southwest, where can you go? We speak a lot about the stigma of HIV, which is, you think it's 2012, maybe there's not as much of a stigma, but we hear things that are really surprising. Youth believing that, you know, if someone spits on you, you can get HIV. Or youth believing that you can really get HIV from casual contact, and therefore you need to ostracize those who are positive. So even today, we still find ourselves correcting a lot of that misinformation. We speak to people about hormone injections and transitioning, if that's what they're interested in, and that's what is going on in their lives. And we do a lot of work about healthy relationships. And a lot of the young people we work with are in relationships that would be characterized as abusive or unhealthy by most people, and sometimes they recognize that, sometimes they don't. So we are never in the business of telling people what to do or how to live their lives. We're just here to give them information and to help them think about things and to kind of evaluate things for themselves. This is a boring slide, so this will be quick. We went from like sexy slide to numbers.
Yes. So this is just a synopsis for the last several years of the number of young women we've seen, the number of MSM and trans folks we've seen, and I realize that it can be problematic for some people that we have lumped MSM and trans together in the same numerical category. That is not by our preference, it is by, you know.
The funders.
Sorry.
So our numbers have pretty much gone up every year. We see the first two numbers, heterosexual female, MSM trans, those are the youth that we work with intensely. Those are youth that we have 3 or more conversations with. And for some kids, that's 3 or more conversations ever, and for some, that's like 3 conversations a week. It really varies based on how long youth stay at the YSC and what level of involvement they want. And the number assessed is just youth that have some contact with our program. Either they're assessed by us or they're assessed by our health educators who do the HIV testing in the Youth Study Center. So now I want to ask, based on what we've told you, say we've worked with, you know, an average of 300 to 500 kids a year. We want to, you know, let you know how many people we've worked with intensely who have actually become HIV positive while they were working with us. Any guesses? How many youth have converted to HIV positive?
You can.
36?
Any other guesses?
All right, well, the truth is that since our program's inception, only 1 youth that we have worked with intensely has become HIV positive during the time that they've worked with us. And we know that, you know, this could mean that there are youth who seroconverted after we lost touch with them. There could be youth that, you know, since we don't track for research purposes, there is no way of knowing this, but anecdotally, since we have had intensive relationships with youth, only 1 that we've been working with has come back positive.
In stark contrast, we had to put this unfortunate slide in. Yeah, just since last October, we've lost at least 3 youth that we know of to gun violence.
It seems like an extreme amount, and it is. And it's, you know, something that it is difficult, you know, when we become very close with a lot of the youth we work with to lose them. But this happens more than having youth become positive.
Yeah. So aside from just the fact that you've seen the services we provide, the kind of coverage that we try to provide, and the relative low number of seroconversions, we felt like this presentation was missing something because we know that research would dictate the successes are the things that you can quantify, but there are a lot of quality of life things that we have also seen that aren't really measurable, that we think are huge successes for our kids and the program in which we work.
So this is another slide with a lot of info, but it's all good stuff, and we wanted you to see it all on one slide. So these are some of the things that we have seen happen in the lives of the youth we've worked with, and they're all pretty amazing. We've seen youth increase condom usage, sexual health knowledge, and prevention skills. We've seen youth access quality medical and mental health care, access preventative medical care, which is huge for a lot of people. We've seen youth advocate for themselves against gender discrimination and other forms of injustice. We've had youth safely begin gender transition, reunite with families, find safe housing and employment, graduate from a variety of programs. And we've had youth come back and speak publicly about their experiences here at the Prison Summit and at the Trans Health Conference a few years ago.
I get column
the
two.
other side.
All right. We've seen a lot of youth complete probation, which is, if you have never seen it, when someone is discharged from probation at 1801, it is like a really
It's the best
amazing
day.
thing. Because it seems like probation just goes on and on and on. We've seen folks give birth to healthy children and also be amazing parents.
Amazing parents in situations that are less than ideal.
Yeah, way less than amazing situations. We've seen folks get through safely and also successfully leave unhealthy relationships. We've seen folks become ready to finally heal after surviving sexual violence. We have seen people beat cancer. And I would point out that the age range of people we're working with is 13 to 23, and we have seen people beat cancer. We have helped people through grieving processes of older folks, but also young people who have died within their families and friend circles and communities. We've seen folks become so stable in their own lives that they want to volunteer to help other people get there too. We've seen folks come back after being gone for a long time and been able to hear that some of these other things have happened for them in their absence. I'm just chuckling at some of these. Folks have won awards within this community and also some national awards, which is fantastic.
And the awards were for courageous LGBT young people who have really shown themselves to be strong and leaders in their communities.
Mm-hmm. And folks have referred other younger people to our services and to other services, which has been tremendously helpful because some of the older youth have become like informal mentors to other younger kids and to their siblings. And of course, we've seen folks continually test negative for HIV, and we really do try to make sure that folks are being tested every 3 to 6 months if possible.
I mean, after all, the HIV is the goal of our program and what our funders are interested in mostly. I mean, all this other stuff is awesome, and that's what interests us, but our funders want to know about people's HIV status. So some of the keys to the success of our program, we feel that it is because it is client-centered and client-driven. People never have to talk about something they don't want to have to talk about. They never have to do something they don't want to do. If you are scared to get an HIV test and you don't want to get one for 2 years, we're not going to force you. We have clients who work with us for very long term, and that sometimes could be 7 years. If we meet a youth when they're 13 and they stay with us until they're 20, that's a long time to have a relationship with a provider, especially at such a young age when there's been a lot of instability in a person's life. Our services, again, are voluntary. We have a lot of great partners in the community, places where we can refer youth. And this is the unique thing, is that the two of us have individually been here for a really long time, and that doesn't always exist, and there's turnover in other places, but it is helpful when a kid gets our phone number and years later they call it and it's still one of us answering. And a lot of the times we go outside the definition of traditional case management, and CRCS, as you'll see on the slide, that means comprehensive risk reduction counseling, and we do that, but we do a lot more than that. So we just wanted to give you a few examples, a case study or two of some of the youth we've worked with. So just to give you a picture of individuals in our program. So this first young woman was my first client ever on the job. So I was extremely new to this whole field, and I was even new to Philadelphia at this point. And when we met this young woman, she was 17, she was incarcerated at the YSC, and she was pregnant. And she was released and had her child, and then went into foster care. In foster care, she was in a home where there was an adult male relative of the foster family who began having sex with her. And she got pregnant immediately after the delivery of her first child, like before she'd even gotten her period after the first baby. And during this time, she was in and out of foster homes that were not ideal. So she's a parent of a newborn, and she's pregnant, and she's in foster care, and she was being placed in foster homes where they were not giving her money, they weren't feeding her, they were taking the foster care stipend money and going to Atlantic City. This is like, you know, I'm not making this up because you really can't make this up. During this time, we worked with her foster care caseworker to try to get her into more stable homes. And by the time she delivered her second baby in the summer of 2003, she was in a nice foster home. And I was actually with her when she delivered her child, and she was there by herself. She didn't have anybody with her other than the doctor, the nurse, and me. And it was like midnight on July 3rd in the summer, and that was kind of one of the most awesome things I've ever gotten to witness. So through her years, she stayed connected with CHOP. She stayed connected with us. She stayed connected with the people in the Adolescent Care Center. But she had 2 young children now, and she didn't have stable housing. So she moved a lot, from placements to mother-baby programs to, you know, just homeless shelters and transitional housing programs. And during this time, one of the providers in the Adolescent Care Center noticed that she had an abnormal pap smear and wanted her to come back for some additional testing. And, you know, typically that means that you come in and you have something called a colposcopy, which will determine if the cells in your cervix are indeed precancerous. So we couldn't get her in for this because she was living in Bucks County at a different placement. Often she would, you know, change phone numbers, and so there'd be long periods of time where we could not get a hold of her. By the time that she did get her cervical health addressed, she was diagnosed with cervical cancer, and she had a radical hysterectomy before she turned 22, and radical hysterectomy for, you know, a person that young is pretty much unheard of. Most of the doctors that we've spoken to have said they have never, ever had a patient that young have a radical hysterectomy. We helped her through her oncology care at Temple, taking her to appointments, being with her during the testing, and helping her out for her recovery. And she didn't even have a stable place to live when she was recovering from cervical cancer. She was living in a room in North Philly. Someone she didn't really know owned the house. She was sleeping on a dirty mattress. It was the middle of the summer. She didn't even have food, really. So we tried to help her out with that and be there for her. But I'm happy to say that today she has beat cancer. She is HIV negative. Her daughters are like, I can never remember their ages. They're like 10 and 9.
11?
Yeah, they're old. They're big. They're like in middle school almost.
I mean, they're old to us. We remember them in diapers.
Right. But she's a fantastic mother. She's in a housing program now that is, the next step is her own house. She has a job at Walmart. She is in auto mechanic school, and she's one of our favorite people. So
you can see how in this situation, not every single conversation or meeting or session that we would have with a person would be like, so, condoms, why are they important? There's a whole lot of other stuff going on here.
Right.
All right. So this is our second and last case study. This young lady came into the juvenile justice system after a long childhood in the foster care system. Both of her parents are deceased, and that's why she ended up in the foster care system. She was identified as male by the juvenile justice system, even though she identified as a trans female. She, by the time we met her, had had a few sexually transmitted infections. She was engaging in sex work. She had been injecting hormones that were not medically regulated. She also had been pumped with some silicone to feminize her appearance. So while she was incarcerated, she went through a tremendous amount of heartache, harassment, abuse, sexual assault, and a number of other indignities.
And a lot of this happened at a facility in western Pennsylvania.
So she was reporting this to us, and we encouraged her to please keep a record of these things, because if there's no record, we can't say anything. So she kept a journal of the things that were happening to her, and she mailed it to us. And we gave a copy of that to Anne Marie Ambrose, and we gave a copy of that to Judge Doherty. And we were not a part of their meetings about this situation, but it was decided that she should be brought back to Philadelphia. And she was placed in a foster care setting, which ended up being a really amazing, safe place for her to be. And she is still very close to her former foster mom, even though she's, in her mid-20s now. That's her granny. So they love each other very much, and they still take good care of each other. In her adult life, she is still doing commercial sex work to make ends meet, and she still has some legal troubles. She has also experienced a lot of personal loss and death, as we all live in the community in which we said we lost 3 clients since October, so she's not exempt from that. However, she makes extremely, extremely good decisions about her health and the health of her Johns when she is working. She is still testing HIV negative, and she has stable housing, and she has a really good support network of her chosen family. And there's some loud silverware going on back here.
So that was just 2 snapshots of some of the people we've worked with. It would be impossible I would love to talk about every single person, because they've all been very special and individuals, but we selected 2 that we thought really exemplified some of the issues that our youth are dealing with. So, as you can imagine, having our program be in the YSC for 10 years, we've seen things change, we've seen things come and go. I'm just going to check on the time. Oh, we're good.
It's 1:15.
Okay. So these are some of the things, some of the trends we've observed. One is a continued and almost increased serious lack of sexual health knowledge and misinformation among youth. We have actually seen cases of syphilis in the last few years, and that used to be an STD that people thought was like kind of extinct. It wasn't around much, like who even gets syphilis anymore? 14-year-old girls in Philly are getting syphilis now.
Yes.
Young parenthood is not something new, but having multiple children at very young age is something we're seeing more of, and I think you can tie that to lack of sexual health misinformation, or knowledge and misinformation as well. I'll let Jasmine speak about this next one.
Because I get all mad about it. So there have been new recommendations for when you should begin Pap smears to screen young women for HPV. And it used to be, when I was coming up, that as soon as you started having sex, you had your Pap smear and you went to the gynecologist, or once you turned 18. But now, the recommendations are to start screening young women with Pap smears at 21. And
So you remember that last slide about the girl that had a radical hysterectomy when she was 21?
Right. Guess where she would be? So we are both deeply upset about this change in regulation, and I think it's really irresponsible. I know that whenever they came up with these recommendations, they were not talking about the populations that we are seeing. HPV, for example, usually will show up within a woman's body within 2 to 3 years of exposure as an abnormal Pap smear. So if you start having sex at age 18, maybe by 21 you should be having PAPs, but if you start having sex at 11 and you have to wait 10 years to get screened, it's highly, highly, highly medically irresponsible. And young women who are at the Youth Study Center have been sent out for pap smears and sent back without them. So, yeah.
That's something
It makes me very upset.
Yeah. Another thing that we have seen a huge increase in is the rise of tattoo parties, tattooing outside of professional shops, and just tattooing among youth in general. Anyone can order a tattoo gun off the internet. You know, anyone can get a professional tattoo gun. It's just not that everyone knows how to safely use them and to use them in ways that are hygienic and sanitary and safe for people. So most of the youth we meet have tattoos at this point. A lot of them will say, "Where did you get your tattoo?" And they'll say, "I went to a tattoo party," or "My boyfriend's cousin did it," or, you know, "Some guy on Fifth Street did it." And it's not done in an environment where there's health and safety regulations happening. So we understand that increases the youth's risk for HIV and hepatitis. You know, I guess I was going to mention something we saw recently, but it might actually give an identity of a youth away, so I can't. But
that's another workshop.
Yeah, so tattooing, we have conversations with youth now. I mean, we both have tattoos. It's not something that we are saying that is bad. We are just trying to get youth to understand that if they want to get them, there is a way to have it done safely that doesn't put their health at risk.
Okay, we're doing the HIV testing. So HIV testing is becoming more normalized and universal in a lot of healthcare settings, which, you know, can be a good thing. But people, young folks, whenever blood is drawn, they assume that they have been tested for everything. I don't know what everything is, but they think everybody has the capability of running tests on everything that could possibly be an ailment for a human body. And it's just not happening. So we end up spending a lot of time explaining to people that they have to give consent to be tested for HIV. And at the Youth Study Center, it's a mouth swab. So we also are trying to get young people used to being tested regularly for HIV as part of their general health care. Like, you get your cholesterol checked, you get your blood pressure, you get your HIV test. Not a big deal. And we also have had a lot of conversations recently with younger women, like in the early teens, who, even if they're at the Youth Study Center not for prostitution or solicitation or blocking the highway or whatever those charges are related to sex work, a lot of young women have said that at some point in their lives they have engaged in commercial sex work for something. So even if they're there for aggravated assault, they might have sex with this guy to get weed, or, you know, to feed their siblings, or... So a lot of that is going on, whether or not those are the charges and whether or not they're telling all of us.
And another trend that I didn't even think about when we were making this presentation is the prevalence of the internet and people advertising for sex and selling sex on the internet. I mean, we do have a lot of youth who have ads on, well, it was Craigslist, and there are, you know, still sites where this happens. It's not like Craigslist eradicated sex work in the world. They like to think they did. But that is something that, you know, youth participate in. If you think you're going online and you're buying sex from this girl who I'm going to believe she's 18 because she says she's 18, she's probably 14. So we wanted to speak specifically about LGBT youth because, believe it or not, some of the most awesome things and positive changes that we've seen over the years have occurred in relation to LGBT youth. So, as you may recall, our program started because DHS observed a lack of services for LGBT youth in custody and at risk, but since then there's been a lot of talk at the Youth Study Center about the treatment of LGBT youth, and it's not like getting locked up there is a great experience for anybody, but it is volumes better than it used to be for this population. We can say that wholeheartedly. It's not just what we've observed, but it's what the youth have told us their personal experiences are. And part of that has to do with a change in policy. In 2009, the city of Philadelphia adopted official policy about the treatment of LGBT youth. So It states, the purpose of this policy is to establish guidelines and procedures to ensure that the YSC staff and contracted providers provide fair, equal, and non-discriminatory treatment for youth who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender, and so that the YSC can provide the highest quality of services to all youth, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. You can see copies of this policy on the phila.gov website if you would like. It's available for anybody to look at. And I'm just going to read you an additional paragraph. It says, LGBT youth at the YSC have a right to be safe from emotional, physical, and sexual abuse by other youth facility staff and contracted providers. Discrimination or harassment on the basis of actual or perceived sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression will not be tolerated. If YSC staff become aware that a youth is being subjected to harassment or violence, YSC will respond with appropriate remedial action designed to stop it. And we do see that happening. A lot of it is thanks to this man in the back, Nelson Walker, who's in charge of such remedial action.
Yes. So, like Erica was saying, these aren't just random words in a policy somewhere in a dusty book. This is like a living, breathing document that is actually at work in the Youth Study Center. And there are a lot of ways that these policies are enforced and supported. And one of them is actually training. And I know that Ms. Claxton is here, and she does some really awesome training. We've heard good stuff about your training, Ms. Claxton. I'm not trying to shout you out too hard, embarrass you. But that stuff is really important, because if people aren't familiar with the issues and haven't been trained, then they're just like wandering in the dark.
Just one anecdote. We had a youth who was in the YSC before this policy was introduced and then got locked up again after. And when she was a young trans-identified female, and when she came back, she was like, what is going on here? And we were like, what do you mean? And she said, they called me Miss and they offered me a bra. And she was like so freaked out by that.
Yes, and she said multiple people have come to my room and asked me if I was comfortable and did I need anything and did I feel safe and was I okay? So she was like, what is going on in here? And that's a really good thing.
Yeah. Let's see. So we presented one year at the Juvenile Detention Center Association of Pennsylvania, giving a presentation about LGBT youth in general. And those presentations are still happening. Ms. Claxton has done them as well. There are also just more resources available to LGBT youth now. There are more friendly places to send youth. We see youth coming out earlier and having more role models. And while one thing we should mention that it is different to be an out gay male or a young trans female on a boys unit than it is to be gay on the girls unit. Sexual fluidity and LGBT issues among the girls in the YSC are very common and pretty much accepted. We were told by one of the young women that when you get locked up at the YSC, if you're a girl that comes in and they put you downstairs with the girls, the first question the other girls ask you is, where are you from? And the second question is, are you gay? Sometimes that's a yes, sometimes it's a no, but I will be in 2 weeks when I start talking to the girl in my room. It's just what happens.
So we have had many valuable partnerships over the years that have helped sustain us and keep us alive and successful and on task. Definitely ACO and DHS, and absolutely Judge Doherty has been a huge support. And he has tried his best to support the young folks that we work with within the court system. One of the ways that he's done that is to funnel a lot of cases to specific judges who he believes will do right by the youth, especially young women and young queer youth. And those judges are Judge Butchart, who is now on Filbert Street, and we miss her, and Judge Lori Dumas Brooks. We've also had tremendous support from the folks at DHS and the Youth Study Center administration.
So thank you. Now we would like to open it up. If anyone has questions or anything they want to talk about, this would be the time.
Crickets. Yes.
Okay, so we had a question about how our program interacts and intersects with the research part of the Adolescent Initiative, and if we feel that, we work together, if what they're doing is helpful, etc. So our program doesn't really interact or have anything to do with the research part of the Adolescent Initiative. The people that run the research are our coworkers and our friends. The most that we interact is if they're looking for youth for a study and we have some youth in the community, we'll give them the opportunity. We'll say, if you are a young Latino MSM, they're currently recruiting for this study, you could make some money. If you want to do it, you can do it.
And just to give you an example, so it's not just like a generic term of research that sounds really nefarious and kind of evil. Research projects include things like, how does an HIV positive person's spirituality help support them through their diagnosis and engagement in treatment? Or if a person is positive or not positive, how does taking a vitamin D supplement impact their immune functioning? So it's not like, mwahaha, we're doing research on children. It's like real stuff that they need to know about to make sure that people are healthy, especially young people, because we may know some of these health outcomes for adults, but if they don't study it in adolescence, then it's just not true until it's been studied.
And oftentimes the youth that we work with, they can't participate in it because they're, they're locked up or they're sent away somewhere. But we have had a few youth that we work with that have decided they wanted to be in a study. But for the most part, we're completely separate from the research, other than the fact that we're like under the same umbrella of services at CHOP.
Any other questions? Comments? Okay.
I wish we could take questions from the internet people.
I know. Hey, internet people, what's up? So if you guys would be so kind as to please fill out your evaluation forms, our kindly and lovely proctor is at the back of the room to collect your forms on the way out if you feel like filling it out.
And also, we accept referrals from anybody. So we have our cards up here. We have our contact information up here. If you know of a youth that you think would benefit from any of our services, please let us know. And we're very informal about referrals. There's no process. There's no paper to fill out. It's just you let us know who this person is, and we'll assess anybody, regardless of whether or not they end up working with them or with us. We'll assess people.
So thank you all very much for coming and for your attention.
And thanks to Chris Ambrose, who couldn't be here today, but is a huge part of our program and why we are so successful.
We love you, Chris.